the lenses and the lighting so exactly. It would be prohibitively complicated. It would be easier to just copy it enough to make it look identical to our memory of the scene. It would be much easier to do that than to actually use the original footage and recreate the scenario exactly if you needed to have them interact with that scene. I mean, it's not Back to the Future 2 where, like, it happened, like, 3 years ago. Like, this is over 30 years in the past now. It's complicated.
Those are all very valid points, and I see your guys' points, and I tip my cap.
I will point out the only thing, honestly, that really throws me out of it is Bill Paxton's character and like those guys. Like when they go to them, that's the only thing where I'm just like, I was all good up until then.
They switch them all around too. Like the right guy doesn't have the spiky hair and all that stuff. And anyway, as you said, Max, it's like if you kind of remember, it works. If you kind of remember what it's supposed to be like, it works.
But if you remember precisely,
I blame it on
it is important that there are differences because it has to be different. I mean, Sarah Connor's got a truck. I mean, like, it's a different timeline.
That's true.
Yeah.
So
I blame it on the timeline.
So for John Connor in this, played by Jason Clarke, the original choice, or the first choice for him, John Connor, was Tom Hardy. But Tom Hardy ended up making Mad Max instead. Probably a better career move. But also some people on the short list for John Connor were Boyd Holbrook, Taylor Kitsch, and Jai Courtney, who eventually got the role. It came down to Boyd Holbrook and Jai Courtney, but after numerous screen tests, they cast Jai Courtney, who is a major issue in this film, I think, because I don't believe him his Michael Bean's Reeves for 1 second. We'll get into that. Emily Blunt was considered for Sarah Connor, who I think would have been an excellent choice. If they never should do this, but they will one day when they remake Terminator. She'll probably be too old to be Sarah Connor, but she would have been my number one list if you're going to remake Terminator to play Sarah Connor. Some other actresses were Brie Larson and Margot Robbie. They all screen tested, but Emilia Clarke won the role. Now
I'm thinking Game of Thrones had a little bit of a push on that decision.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now the T-1000 is played by Byung-Hun Lee, and he's in such movies as G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra, things like that. And there was talk about Robert Patrick coming back. Robert Patrick, he told him from the jump, look, I can't do what I used to do. I'm too old, not interested. So if he had maybe been more interested, they might have pursued that in the same way they got Arnold in the film. But I think, and we'll get into this, but I think the T-1000 is probably one of the better parts of the film, and I really buy Byung-Hun Lee as the Robert Patrick kind of T-1000. So I thought that was good casting. Now, there is a theory based off the trailers that Robert Patrick actually cameoed in the film. In the scene where Arnold and John Connor are fighting in the hospital, there's a scene of some people in a waiting room, and there's a guy that looks a lot like Robert Patrick with a beard, like sitting there, and people thought that was a little cameo, but it was not. Robert Patrick came out and confirmed that he was not in the film. So, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to be associated with this film either.
Spoilers for your opinion on the film.
Loved it. Now, some thoughts of the people who actually made the film. Arnold Schwarzenegger, he considers this the real Terminator 3, much like James Cameron did at the time. I'm curious to see what he thinks about that now, although he did say he enjoyed making Terminator 3, so he didn't completely throw it under the bus. Now, speaking of, some other cast members' opinions of it, Emilia Clarke, she admitted in a recent interview that the production was not a smooth one, and it took a huge toll on Alan Taylor, and they had a previously established, working relationship from Game of Thrones, so she could see his, the stress and all that stuff he put on him. And it was a very unhappy, frustrating production, and it was notorious to the point of over at the Fantastic Four film, Fan4stick, which was also troubled. They made jackets over on that production that said, "At least we're not on Terminator." So when the Fan4stick crew thinks your film is more messed up than them, you have an issue. So,
wow.
And part of it, and even in the post production, there was drama because Alan Taylor, he was dismayed by the fact that the trailer gives away a huge twist of the movie that John Connor is a Terminator. And he was not told beforehand this was going to happen. He did not approve of it, but the marketing department overruled any kind of creative decisions, and they went forward with it. which this is the theme for the Terminator movies. It happens in Terminator 2. It happens in Terminator Salvation. It happens here. I don't understand why they just couldn't just keep these reveals for the film. I think it would have been a really cool twist at the time, but going into it knowing that did not help.
No. Yeah, it is a problem with this series of movies, and I don't know why they do it, and I don't know why it's such a problem with this series of movies. These are things that should be kept secret that they're giving away in the trailers for the movies. I don't know. Like, even when I remember seeing the trailers for this ahead of time, and I'm like, what? Like, yeah. And then once you see the movie, it's like, that is a major plot twist.
Yeah, that it's over halfway through the film that happens.
Yeah, it's over halfway through the film, and like the mislead lasts maybe 4 minutes. Like, he shows up, and they're like, I'm a good guy. And they're like, oh, he's a good guy. And then the Terminator shoots him, and he's like, he's not a good guy. And we're like, what? Oh, yeah. Oh no. Your mysterious resurrection was somehow marred by this terrible betrayal.
That is a valid point. They don't stay with it for long. For example, T2, the first 30 minutes, you don't know who's the good Terminator or the bad Terminator. Like, it's built into the story
also,
to that point.
So who cares? Like, I don't care about any of this. Like, I don't care about what they reveal in the trailers. I mean, so what? Like, if it doesn't work on the second viewing, then, like, who cares? Like, I have no... I have never had an issue with a spoiler being in a trailer or an advertisement or somebody inadvertently revealing something. I still haven't seen Solo. I know that Darth Maul is in it. I don't care at all. It means nothing to me that there is a spoiler that has been revealed to me, because the fact is, if the movie is working, I will forget. And when it happens, I'll be like, oh yeah, I knew that. Somebody told me, but now, yeah, okay, I get it now. But when it's not working, you're just thinking, oh yeah, this isn't working.
I've seen Solo twice, and I still don't care that Darth Maul's in it.
Hey, guys, you know who else is in Solo?
No.
Emilia Clarke.
Yeah.
So, this film, before it was even released, Paramount greenlit 2 sequels to make a trilogy, because for the last 3 Terminator movies, you have to plan a trilogy before they come out. And of course, the movie did not do well at the box office, did not do well commercially, so those films did not happen, and they look like fools for doing that, and a post-credit scene, which we will get into. And if you want to know the numbers of the box office here, the approximate budget for Terminator Genisys was $155 million. Now, it did make $440 million worldwide, but the catch is 80% of that was overseas, and it only made $89 million here at home. And they rated it PG-13 with the hopes they would bring in more audience, but it didn't work, and it was just very disappointing results for all involved, and that's why we're getting the next reboot, and this is the real Terminator 3, finally, for Terminator Dark Fate.
Well, you'd think they'd learn that overseas can do pretty good for markets. I was just watching the bonus features for Vanishing Point, and like, that movie did not take off in America, and it totally took off in like France or something like that, and then made $1 million in, well, not more than $1 million in the States when it came back. I don't know.
2 million.
2 million, maybe a bit more. Who knows? Okay, I'm gonna just jump into this right away and say that I think this movie is really fun, and I'm gonna start with the hottest take of all. I think that this does a better job of fan service and good time than The Force Awakens did, because in my opinion, they're the same kind of sequel in that they're trying as hard as they possibly can to hit all the nostalgia buttons. And for me, this one worked big time, and Force Awakens did not work big time for me at all. So I'm going to start there with my lunatic theory, and I just lob the ball to whoever wants to just kill me.
I don't know how hot that take is. That seems pretty on point. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. Like, The Force Awakens is like it's kind of a lazy remake of A New Hope, and like all of these franchises that have been around for a million years are dealing with the same problem of like they all have to be about going forward into the future, and they're all sort of trapped in this paradigm of we're locked into the past in some way, and like Star Wars is locked into it in a very upsetting, almost abusive way, where the past is like they come home and the past is like, where's dinner, and they're like, I don't know what you need to eat. You keep changing your mind all the time, and the past is like, who cares what you think? What matters is that midi-chlorians are dumb, and it like the
practical effects.
Yeah, and Star Trek has a similar problem where like they desperately want to do something new, but nobody knows how to just push them forward into something new, because the model that has been crafted is such an intricate like Rubik's Cube in 3 dimensions, but the cube itself is the walls of the room that you're in. So like you can rearrange the pieces, but you're still in the frickin' cube. It's a nightmarish puzzle, and the only way to break out of it is to sort of like rearrange it into an arrow and say, guys, we're not in the cube anymore. Let's try to be okay about this. But we all know that the fans are going to react in a mixed way, because the fans are a lot of different people and they have different points of view. And it becomes a real problem when people start hearing the fans as one voice. And that's the Borg, and the Borg are bad. So Terminator actually has a very clever out. And I think that there's a brilliance to this. This is why I think Genisys is brilliant. Because Terminator has time travel. And with time travel, you can change the past and just start an entirely new timeline and say, look, the past is no longer a factor here. We start from there. We change everything. We're going forward into the future. The past is not a part of this, but like everything is interconnected in some way, in some distant way. The past played a role in this point in time coming to be. So Genisys as a reboot, I think, is much smarter than the other ones on the table currently.
I see what you're saying with that, because I think it helps to be a comic book fan. You can look at this like as a multiverse, right, of these film franchises, right?
Well, it is a multiverse. It has to be.
It has to be. And you're absolutely right, because Terminator does, in-universe, have time travel and timelines and things. So you can play with that in the universe. Whereas something like Halloween... It's just, here are 7 different ways that these movies fit together. There's no reason they don't or do fit together, but here, and look at this chart, and you can figure out which ones to watch where.
Guys, have you done Halloween?
We did Halloween.
You did Halloween?
We actually did.
I haven't listened to the Halloween series, because I got some hot takes on the most recent Halloween.
Well, let me ask you this, Max. Did you like Terminator Salvation? Because I feel like Salvation tried to do something different, and because, quote-unquote, the fans, as you said, or the public, or whatever the perception was, did not respond to it, they're like, oh, okay, we better go back to our comfort zone, and that's why we got a beat-for-beat, rehash of everything we had seen in the first 2 and, by extension, 3 films, as opposed to something that was different, like Salvation.
This is the thing. I don't really care about like the qualitative ratings of these things or ranking them. But like I will say this: walking out of Terminator Salvation, my first thought was, of all of the things to gloss over, how they just took a random heart and put it in John Connor. I don't understand why that is the thing that is somehow like that happens off screen. Like that's the titular thing. Like that's how they end the movie. Like his strong heart, which they kept hinting, and I'm like, why do they keep mentioning this guy's heart? It's like, how strong is your heart? Is your heart doing like deadlifts? And like you're like, wow, that heart really can really pump some iron. And then they like take his heart and put it in John Connor, and I'm like, you can't just do that. Like, you have to. There are tests and compatibility issues. John Connor's going to be on anti-rejection drugs for the rest of his life. There's a lot of pipe that needs to be laid before you just go like, oh, I'll take this heart and put it over here. And